Alright, let's take a look at mortars in the game, how they're used, and the different types of actual shells they have. There's many different types of mortars in the game, which is excellent because they each have featured plus and minuses, again, that give you great gameplay balances. A large mortar will have great strength, destructive power, and range, but may not be that accurate, may take a long time to arc and to rotate into position, and there may be a longer reload time. A smaller weapon such as this small light mortar, this is a 5 centimeter GRW36 light mortar. It has a range of about 110 meters, but it has a very small weapon here if we look in the inventory, and it only has one type, and this is an explosive shell. But on the upside, what it offers is a very fast loading and lots of very fast to refire. So it can move into position, it's portable, it's carried by only one soldier. So that soldier can carry it, run into position, get down in the weeds, fire off 3 shells, run to this farmhouse, get out of the way because they're going to counter fire on him. So it's mobile, fast, but it has low power of destruction. This one over here, if I grab this, and this one over here takes 2 crew. Some take one, most bigger ones take 2 crew. Take your cursor and make sure you go, usually in the lower part of the mortar itself is where you can get the icon for them to man the equipment. Sometimes if you're trying to get them to man the equipment, you're clicking here and nothing's happening, you're clicking. But you have to usually go at the base of the mortar, and that will get them to go in. So you right click. So 2 guys will man this mortar. 1 guy can actually fire it if one gets killed, but you need 2 guys to move it and to have maximum speed for reload and moving. So it has an arc of fire, which if I zoom out, you can see the arc lines here, and it can only fire in that arc within those 2 lines. If I want to fire at something, a tank moving in way over here on the right, I would have to grab these guys and I would right click and drag in that direction.
Yes, sir.
So I grabbed him, held down where I wanted to relocate, and dragged out in the direction. So I'm holding down my right mouse button and dragging out to the direction. Very quick, very fast. They'll back up and they'll rotate into that position, and they're ready to fire in that arc of view now. So let's get them back to where they were. Click down and drag.
Ready on that, sir.
So that's how you get your mortar team to realign their weapon. Now, the range on this weapon, if we look at its info bar here, it's a heavy mortar, 4.2 inch Mark II, a range of 220 meters, long range, 8 rounds per minute speed of fire rate. It features 3 different types of mortar rounds. The first one is 4.2 inch HE, which is high explosive, used for destroying small vehicles, light vehicles. Can track medium to large vehicles, can be tracked. So if you can get a large tank tracked, which means it can't move, it can't defend itself, it can't retreat, it's likely then you can actually kill it. So it's good for tracking vehicles, destroying houses, taking out many enemy troops in the field. It has a large radius of kill radius, which means if I fire around and it lands in this field here, it's going to have a lot of kill distance that will knock out enemy soldiers and actually kill many of the soldiers within a huge kind of little radius here. So it's good weapon for all-around destruction, but you're not going to be able to take out very specific hardened targets like medium tanks or large tanks. You may track them though, which is just as good in many cases, because then your forward specialty troop can go move forward, such as with a bazooka or some explosives to take out the tank once it's not mobile anymore. Alright, so if we get these guys out of here by hitting either the G key, moving away, hitting the G key, so you have to move away from the actual disc, hit G, and then you get the cursor for them to move out. So, and that's a left click. They'll leave that. And we can get them into another one. And at the base here, if I double click on there. And now this is a slightly smaller version of a mortar. Let's click and rotate them. And we can see that, again, this only has two different types of mortar rounds. In this case, we have a high explosive and we have a smoke phosphorus round. So, also known as a Willie Pete or a white phosphorus round. So we're going to demonstrate all these once we go through some of these mortars here. We'll demonstrate how the rounds work. So again, we hold down the G key, select them, the G key, and move away from them, and that'll give the icon for them to get out. Now, if we take one of these guys and hover over one of these little mini mortars, we'll just get a quick look at what they do. So this mini mortar has two shells and it has a camouflage bag. So you can move in the field, you have Willie Pete and you have high explosive shells. They're small little rounds that do lighter damage, but he's highly mobile, can camouflage himself, and he can fire and retreat because they're going to see the smoke and hear where he's firing from, and they're going to counter fire quickly. So he moves, so we double click on him. He can move at a certain speed, and he's carrying that mortar with him, and you can have him go into position. Not only that, but you can tell him to crouch down, I believe. So
already on that, sir.
Certain ones they can actually crouch down. If the mortar is small enough, he may be able to or may not be able to. Looks like he can actually crouch down. The smallest mortar, they can actually crawl with the mortar. But again, it's the very smallest rounds and the smallest tube. So he could go up in here. And that's the balance of the game. Large mortars, big power, less mobile, and you know, they can be counter-fired on. So there's pluses and negatives with every system here. So now he's in the ground, in this area where he can get camouflage. We can tell him to get down, I believe, by the artillery position. And that's this button over here. So this mortar, you have to use the artillery position button, not the regular key that gets you up and down. But he's able to move, I think, or can he move while he's down? No. So this mortar mechanic is balanced where he has this mortar, two different types. He can't crawl, but you can put him in camouflaged area. You can hit this button, that'll get him down, and then hit the E key, and he can start to fire. And you can see his range of fire if I zoom out here as he rotates, and you can see how far he can fire. And it looks like the range is not too bad, pretty good for that, for a portable mortar. He can fire up to here because that's where the number goes from white to red. Now it's red, he's out of range. So he can fire a small weapon here. Let's fire. And you can see it flashing down at the lower left. So that mortar is going to fall anywhere within the big white disc that you see me moving left and right here. The big white disc. So it's not that precise. Mortars aren't that precise, but they're more of a field weapon where it's a long, you get damage in a wide area. And the downside is that you can fire over buildings, get long range, but it's not that accurate. But at least you know it's going to fire somewhere within that white circle here. Let's fire another one within range. We got to bring it back in a little bit. Now these are explosive rounds, and look how fast I can fire, and then fire again. So his reload rate is a lot quicker than the large. See, that one fell way at the end of the disc here, so that was a while back. But his reload is quite quick. You can fire again. And so get out of E, switch to Willie Pete, a white phosphorus round, which will be used for burning buildings and getting enemy out of trenches and whatnot. Back in direct control, same range. The Willie Pete shell might be able to get close enough to this building to catch it on fire. Let's just at the edge of its range. Let's fire. Oh, it was way over there. So this weapon doesn't have very good accuracy in this case, but it's mobile. So in this case, it doesn't have the range, so we would get out of direct control. We would tell him to move up a little bit. We double click on him. He moves a little bit forward, and we can drag, click and drag in what direction we want him to get set up, and tell him to go down with this key down here. That tells him to get down. And direct control, he should be within range of the building. And can fire off. We'll try another Willie Pete round. It takes him a while to rotate into position. And fire. And fire again. So he can fire so quickly that before the round actually drops, he's ready to refire usually. So when it stops flashing, you know he's ready to refire. Just about. So now he's within range to start affecting the buildings. Those buildings will start on fire. So that's kind of the larger mini mortar, let's call it. The larger of the mini mortars. So we'll have him get back here. We'll take this guy, and we'll take the smallest mortar. Let's zoom in here. Let's take him to go into the smallest mortar here. He'll man that. Now this one, I believe he can move if we get him to...
Ready on that, sir.
Unless the mechanic has changed, possibly, but...
Yes, sir.
It's kind of caught in between all these mortars, but...
All ready on that, sir.
So ideally you would want a mortar, a small enough mortar where he can crawl
To fight.
while getting into a position. But so now I'm going to click and drag him out, so see if he gets down into position automatically. So he does. So it's a faster way to, that you could use this button to get him up and to get him down. But if you want him to go up to this house and quickly get into position, you would double click, have him start moving, and as soon as he starts getting there, I would click down and drag, have him ready to fire out in that direction, and he gets down automatically. So that's a better way to do it. Hit the E key, and in direct control, he will not move. So in this case, the soldier cannot move, but I believe there's a mortar in the game, or there was a mortar that they actually can crawl while they have the mortar ready, but regardless. So he's ready to fire. We move out, see where his arc of fire is. He has only one type of weapon, shell. So it's taken him a while to rotate his weapon into position. Little less range, smaller, little mortar, only one type. But a very fast reload rate again as he's firing again. Sorry, wrong button. HE in the middle of the reticule says it's high explosive and it's reloading. That little HE in the, as it's reloading. So again, it's firing generally within this disc, and they get more accurate as the longer they fire on the target, the more accurate they will slowly get, which is a great mechanic. Let's get out of there. This guy can bring his weapon back here. And let's take a couple guys and get into a very large mortar.
Go ahead.
Let's take these two guys. The base of the mortar, have them man that. And this is one of the largest mortars in the game. Let's drag, click and drag them into that position over there.
Already on that, sir.
And sometimes they back into it, and you just have to be patient as they rotate around, and he'll rotate in the right. So we see his cone of arc of fire within those two lines, and this is a large one, so it has only one type of shell, but it's very big. It's 150 millimeter type 97 high explosive shell. So if I go into direct control, it should have a nice long range. And it takes them a long time to arc it over, so you have to be patient. As if you're wondering why it's not firing, it's because they're moving this arc disc and rotating. And that's a balance in the game. It's a very powerful mortar, so it takes time for them to rotate it into position. It has a lot farther range. As you can see here, its range is, I think it can go all the way up to in here. Let's see how far, about here. So its range is greater. And if it fires somewhere within this cone here, the disc, it will have enough firepower to actually blow up half a building at a time, take out many, some small vehicles, track larger vehicles, and take out a lot of troops. So let's fire, left click. HE means it's high explosive coming. Reload time. See, the reload time is longer, but that was a very powerful explosion. Let's fire again over here. And that took out the whole side of the building on that side over there. So it's a weapon that has enough destructive power to take down buildings. We'll get out of direct control, and let's go back into this first weapon we have here. We'll grab these two guys. Have a man click at the base, double click. Again, if one of them gets shot, they'll still be able to fire the weapon, but they won't be able to move the weapon. So in this case, we have one other feature here, that it comes with sandbags. So it's a medium-sized mortar, medium-large, and if I click this button, it'll have sandbags to protect it. They'll be able to leave, so if I hit the G key out here, they can leave the weapon, but they won't be able to move the weapon out of there. So if I grab them again, tell them to go pick it up and move it out, they're protected in there, but the weapon's kind of stuck. Another balance issue, which, advantage, disadvantage. So if I want them to bring it and drag it here, they won't be able to get out of there. They're kind of just stuck in there.
They're itching to fight.
You can have them drop the weapon and leave, but they're kind of stuck. One way around that is to use an explosive to blow up the sandbags, and that will free the weapon, but you have the possibility of destroying the weapon at the same time. So let's check out again these three different types of mortars. We have the HE that we've already looked at, Willie Pete, which this one's a larger Willie Pete. But let's go with the third one now. Let's have them load up the smoke, and this will flash until it's loaded. When it's loaded, now it's loaded, we hit the E key, direct control, and we move out to see our range and where we can fire here within the arc of fire. Looks like we got decent range. Now these are just smoke shells, so very useful for certain situations. It takes a while for them to get into the position here. It could be because I moved them out of position and they're hitting their sandbags, but let's just try that out. I think it's because I repositioned them inside and they're too close to the sandbags.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's the case. So
Already on that, sir.
let's see. They were too close to the edge here and they can't get around that. So I'm going to cheat and just grab them in F3. I'm going to just grab the sandbags and move them, and we can delete that. So that's how you can get around that if you ever need to. But that was the issue. If you ever come across that where they're not able to target anything properly, it's because the mortar itself is up against a house or building, or it's too close to a vehicle, it's behind a vehicle, it can't fire over. So your aiming reticule down here doesn't act normal. It will be because they don't have a clean fire arc over a house or something blocking them. So let's select that again in F1. We get in our side here, F1. And let's try it again. We have the smoke loaded up. And let's zoom out. Direct control. And now the arc should work normally. And we can see where we can fire. And our range number comes into play. So it's a white number saying we can go even further. Now, smoke is very handy with mortars because oftentimes there may be a very strong, say, field gun, anti-tank field gun right here behind these sandbags as an example. And that field gun, say a Pac 40, has super long range. And that may be giving our troops and our tanks a lot of trouble far way down here. Because the Pac 40 could fire probably to around here. And so our weapons, unless we have a weapon that can outrange that Pac 40, and there's not too many things can outrange a Pac 40, but so every time we step out and try to fire on it, it fires on us. If we move a tank up, it fires on our tank, and it's causing a real issue. So we have to blind that Pac 40 crew somehow. And the game mechanic which we can do it is with a mortar, smoke mortar shell. Now again, it's not going to be completely accurate, but smoke dissipates and we're likely to smoke up that area long enough and wide enough so they'll lose vision. Let's fire a round. As soon as it's reloaded, we'll fire another round until we get smoke. Oh, that's my mistake. That was an HE weapon. Needed to have smoke in there. So that Pac 40 crew is actually dead now, but let's just keep going for the sake of demonstration here. And one way I should have known that was an HE shell is if I go in, you can see when it reloads, it would have shown an HE in the reticule, but regardless. Let's fire the smoke. And now you can see that it has white phosphorus. So again, I screwed up. And it's white phosphorus instead of smoke, and for some reason sometimes it's hard to actually get the smoke. There's 3 different rounds. It's the high explosive, Willie Pete, and the smoke round is on the bottom here. And the Willie Pete and the actual smoke, sometimes you have to do that twice to make sure you're getting your smoke round. Or you could double click up here, I believe. Let's try that. So you can double click in your inventory to make sure you're getting the right round. Sometimes these 3 boxes here are a little wonky and you might select Willie Pete instead of the smoke even though you've clicked on here. So if you want to be double sure, go up here and double click on the smoke. And then, because it doesn't actually tell you anywhere where it's actually loaded up, I don't believe. So it should be a smoke round now. Go in direct control. Fire again with where that Pac 40 was generally, and it should be smoke. And that was smoke because it hit a building and it's starting to smoke. But it hit the wrong position. Let's fire again. We want to smoke this whole area. Fire again. Anywhere between us and the Pac 40 needs to be all smoked up. And once it is, we can move forward to destroy it with specialty crews. You may have to fire 3 or 4 times. That will be a good one because if the Pac 40 was over here, this smoke should... Okay, so as soon as that's going, the smoke will last long enough for a tank to move up, get into position. We could have, you know, troops waiting. We could have had troops hidden over here behind the fence. And all this time the smoke is here, they could be moving forward. And we could move up a flamethrower, a tank, or some weapon to take them out while they can't see through this smoke field. So that's how you would use the mortar smoke round. I'm not going to edit this video and take out the mistakes of loading the wrong rounds, because sometimes you do load the wrong rounds, and you need to know how to reload them and make sure you have the right one. So you can click up here. So I double clicked on this up here. Its flash is saying it's loading, and that will be a high explosive, and I can see it's high explosive. And if I do want a Willie Pete now, double click on the Willie Pete, and this should be a Willie Pete round. As soon as it stops flashing, I go in direct control, and I'll fire one off. As soon as it moves to arc, and that should be a Willie Pete. So let's just fire it off. So that's the white phosphorus Willie Pete round. So that's one way to get around this little bug of selecting weaponry, and that happens on tanks too sometimes. So if you find that it's hard to get an actual smoke round in your tank or in your mortar to actually click in there, try clicking up here in the inventory, double click on it, and that should work. So generally there are 3 levels of mortar. Super large mortars up here, very big, but it takes a long reload, long range, and it's a slow rotation speed. You have medium mortars that are still mobile, somewhat mobile, but they move slower. You need 2 people, but it does come with 3 different types of shell, and it does come with sandbags. And you also have another type, which is the mini mortars, which are manned by guys on the ground, which can get in very precise places.
Already on that, sir.
They can be hidden in tall grass. They can fire 3 or 4 rounds quickly. Then you can, with one button, you can grab them and tell them to get out of there and hide behind that barn over here, because they're going to counter, their mortars are going to counter the mortar that just fired from here. They'll see the smoke and they'll hear the fire. Because the game has a mechanic where their side has officers and snipers, and they have binoculars, and they actually look. The game mechanic is they hear and they see within their range of vision. And so when your guy fires here, even if he's hidden in bushes and brush, they're going to counterfire fairly quickly on him. So the big upside on the mini mortar is that they're mobile. They can fire and run. And so the medium, large, and mini mortars all have plus and minuses again, which is great gameplay, and that's the way it should be. Hope you enjoyed this video. It was a little bit long-winded. Subscribe and like, and we'll catch you on the next one.